Ashley, and today I'm going to show you how to make this Kansas State Wildcats logo. So if you have a favorite team that you haven't seen on my channel yet, let me know in the comments and I'll see if I can make a pattern for it in the future. So some different teams lend themselves more to this kind of small motif pattern than others, but this one I was really happy with how it came out. I really like this small motif style pattern because it can be incorporated into a lot of different projects. So kind of one of the most obvious is at the end of a scarf. You can just continue to crochet and make a scarf out of this. You can also make it into a blanket by just crocheting a bunch of squares with the different colors and then some of the logos and then stitching them together at the end. You could also incorporate it into a clothing design or a beanie design. It would take a little bit of work to adapt the pattern to that, but you could easily add it to it. Really, the possibilities are endless. So let's get into how to actually crochet the Kansas State Wildcats logo. So for the materials that we'll need to make the Kansas State Wildcats logo, first is yarn. So I have a weight for acrylic yarn. I love this yarn from Hobby Lobby, and the purple that I chose is the color grape. And then I just have white here. It's left over from a previous project, but it's just white from the same brand. And then I have a size G 4.25 millimeter crochet hook. If you want your end project to be a slightly different size, I would recommend going up or down in crochet hook size. So if you use a smaller hook, the pattern's going to be tighter and end up smaller. So you might want to keep that in mind. I also have a yarn needle here for weaving in my end at the very end, some scissors for cutting my yarn, and the crochet chart, which I have just printed out. You could also use the written pattern if you would prefer. So when you're following a crochet chart like this, you're going to start crocheting at the bottom right corner of the chart and work back and forth. So all of the odd number rows are going to be worked right to left, and then the even number rows are going to be worked left to right. So that makes it a little bit easier to keep track of. You don't have to remember quite as much. So if you can see, the first row here is just a solid row of the background color, which I'm using white. So I have basically a 2 single crochet stitch border around each direction. So my first 2 rows are going to be all white. This pattern is worked all in single crochets. If you're not familiar with a single crochet or how to start crochet, check out my channel. I do have a whole playlist on the different terminology and the different stitches. They're real short videos that you can check out. But for this, we're going to start with single crochet. So we're going to do a foundation chain first. So I'm going to make a slip knot. And then we're going to single crochet. Sorry, we're not going to single crochet yet. We want to have 28 single crochets in our first row. So for our foundation chain, we have to do 29 chains. Okay, so we're going to chain 29 and then we'll do 28 single crochets on our first row. So chain 29, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. Okay, now I work into the back loop of my foundation chain, so you'll see me working in the back loop. You can work wherever you want into your foundation chain, whatever you're comfortable with. If you don't know how to work into the foundation chain, I have a video on that specifically, so just you can search Crafty with Ashley foundation chain and I'm sure you'll find it. So when we're working single crochet, we're going to put our first single crochet in the second chain from the hook, and that's why we did 1 extra chain compared to the number of single crochets we want. So now I'm going to single crochet 28. Six, 7, 8, One thing to note with these color changing patterns is it's really easy to start getting a little bit tighter once you start doing the color changes. So I try to consciously make my first couple rows that don't have color changes a little bit tighter than I would normally crochet, because I know that this is going to be tighter. So that way the project doesn't just shrink a little bit as I go. 5, 26, 27, and 28. All right, so that's my first row of single crochet. My second row is going to be another 28 single crochets in white. So I just am going to turn and then work across. Now, one thing is, when I work single crochets, I don't do a turning chain. If you like to do a turning chain with your single crochets, go for it. I don't like to. I find I get more even edges if I don't. So I just pull my first loop up just a little bit farther to accommodate the height difference. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to work over this starting tail so that I don't have to weave it in at the end. So to do that, I'm just going to tuck it up behind my project, and I'm going to insert my hook into that stitch, making sure that I'm working under that tail. And then I'm going to yarn over and pull up a loop. And then when I do my next yarn over and pull through, my hook is over that tail. Okay, so I yarn over and pull up that loop. Okay, so then I just keep this tail tucked right next to my stitches and keep doing that same thing. So making sure that my hook is under it when I insert, and then when I yarn over to pull through, it's over it. Okay, so I'm going to do a couple stitches here, and then I'm going to pull that kind of tighter so that it's not loose over here on the turning chain. So I'm just going to tighten it up a little bit and then loosen it back so that the tension is appropriate to what I want. And then I just keep working over that tail, okay, until I run out, basically. Now, as I go, I do pull it a little bit tighter, again, just to make sure that when I'm done, it's not like loose or twisted in there. So I'll show you kind of how I address that in a minute. Okay, I'm getting toward the end of this tail now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it tighter, and it basically just kind of grows, right? And then keep working over it. And then eventually I'm going to run out or not be able to hold it anymore, right? So I just let it run out. Now I'm at the end of the row, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stretch that back out so that it's nice and flat. And that makes that tail just kind of pull back into the stitches, and it's just hidden in there. Okay, so now I finished my first 2 rows of single crochet. So now I'm on to row 3, and this is where my color changing starts. Okay, so I'm going to make my turn exactly the same way. And then I'm going to start with 17 single crochets in white. $14, $15, $16. And on the 17th, because I'm going to do a color change, I'm not going to actually complete that single crochet. Okay, so on the 17th, I'm starting it, but then instead of yarning over and pulling that loop through the 2 through the 2 loops on my hook, I'm going to pick up my purple, get a loop of the purple, and pull that through. Okay. Now I'm going to kind of tighten down on both the white and the purple yarn strands here. And then I'm going to do single crochets in purple, and I'm working over those strands of yarn just like I worked over that starting tail, okay? And I have 3 single crochets in purple. So that was 1, 2, 3. And on the third, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start that single crochet, but instead of finishing it with purple, I'm going to pick up the white and finish that single crochet in white. Okay, so then for this one, I finish off the row with white single crochets, 8 of them. Okay, and I'm going to keep working over these purple strands of yarn. Okay, so I'm pulling down the purple yarn just a little bit to make the tension correct, and then working over it. And then I got to the end of that row. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to cut the purple yarn that was the tail, not the working purple yarn, just the tail. So I pulled it tight, and then I'm cutting it close to the base there. And then I'm going to stretch it back out to tuck that in. Okay. Now we're going to make a turn, and we're going to keep carrying along this working purple yarn with us so that we can continue to do color changing for the whole pattern. Okay, so we turn, and then just like we did on that starting tail, I pull up that purple yarn behind my work, make sure that my first single crochet, the hook goes under that yarn, and then when I finish it, it's over. Okay, and then I work that way for 7 single crochets in white, and then I'll change to the purple again. Okay. So after I do a couple stitches, I just kind of pull that yarn tight so that it tucks in on the edge a little bit better, and then I just keep going. Forgot what I was doing. Okay, 7 single crochets, but I don't want to finish that 7th, so I pulled out a couple of those stitches, but now I'm at my 7th, and I'm finishing that 7th single crochet with purple and switching, and I'm doing 3 single crochets in purple. And then I switch back to the white, and I do 3 single crochets in white. So at this point, it's just following the pattern, making sure I'm counting correctly. Okay, switch to purple, and I'm doing 1 single crochet in purple. Okay, so 1, I'm starting that single crochet and then switching right back to the white. Don't let that throw you off. You're doing it correctly. And then I do 4 single crochets in white. Switch to purple, 2 purple, switch to white, and then finish off the row with 8 single crochets in white. All right, so I finished that 4th row of single crochet. So my 5th one will again be worked right to left. And so I'll start this one with 7 single crochets in white. One thing I'm going to point out real quick is as you are crocheting this, because you're constantly dropping the yarn and picking up the other one in the same direction, the yarn will get twisted. Okay, so every once in a while, I just pull my loop up nice and big, take out the hook, and then twist my project so that the yarn gets untwisted again. It just helps you keep your tension a little bit better, because if these yarns are tangled or twisted together too tightly, it's going to be hard for the yarn to feed through. So I do that every once in a while throughout these color changing type of projects. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of speed through this, because we're just doing the same thing, counting for each row, and then I'll pick it back up toward the end of the color changes to show you how I finish off the color changing and then finish off the project. Okay, I'm to my final row of color changes, so row 21. And I'm going to show you kind of how I finish off this last row of color changes and basically cut off my yarn and weave it in. So I'm going to start with 11 single crochets in white. Switching colors, doing 5 in purple. Switching colors, 1 white, and switching colors, 6 purple, switch colors, 1 white, switch to purple, switch, and finish off the row with 2 white. And I just continue carrying on that yarn the same way. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the yarn, but leave a good sized tail, like so. Okay, and then I'm going to turn and carry that yarn with me, just as I've done the whole time. And this will weave in that end, so I don't have to do it later, right? So I just work over it like I did my starting tail, okay? And then these are just 2 rows of 28 single crochets, just in white, so no color changing or anything for these last 2 rows. Nice and simple. Okay, so when I get to the end of that row, I cut my tail long enough so that it's still sticking out. So I'm gonna pull that tight again, kind of wrinkle up the fabric, cut it, and then loosen it back up so that the tension is appropriate. And then I'm gonna turn and I just have my final row of single crochets in white, and then I will fasten off and weave in my end. So for fastening off, I finished my last single crochet. Now I'm going to cut a decent length tail here, and then I'm going to pull up 1 more loop and pull it all the way through to create a knot. Okay, then I'm going to take my yarn needle and weave in my ends. Now I prefer to use a yarn needle to weave in my ends. Some people use crochet hooks. I used to do that as well, but then I started using my yarn needle and found it to be way more efficient. So I'm just going to weave in this end. There's not a right or wrong way to do this, really. As long as it's secure, you're in good shape. So I tend to go partway down 1 row, pull that through. Again, make sure my tension is good, and then turn and go back up the other direction. That way I just make sure I have a turn in there. It makes it more secure. You can zigzag, you can weave, you can go straight down and back up. I go across and back across, but do whatever you want as long as it's secure. And I just tend to do it once, back and forth. If it's something that I'm going to be washing a lot or going to have more wear and tear, I might go back and forth a few times instead of just once. Okay, so then I pull it tight, cut it off, and stretch it back out. Okay, and there we have our finished crochet Kansas State Wildcats logo. So again, here is that finished Kansas State Wildcats logo. If you like this video, please hit the like button. It really does help out the channel. Also, check out the rest of my channel for even more content. Thank you so much for watching, and I really hope you enjoyed it. Have an awesome day.